Thank you. It's an honor to be here today to discuss such an important topic, together with people that have the power and the resources to improve and regulate artificial intelligence so that it benefits everyone. My name is Leonardo Nicoletti. I'm a data journalist at Bloomberg News. I work with data and visual storytelling to report on issues at the intersection of technology and society. Today, I'm here to talk to you about generative artificial intelligence and the work that data journalists like myself are doing to investigate the potential harms of this technology. First, what is generative AI? Generative artificial intelligence is a new type of AI that has experienced widespread adoption across a number of industries because it makes it very easy to create new content like images or text or videos for things like marketing. Generative AI can also help automate tedious tasks like resume screening and other hiring processes. But as soon as this technology became mainstream, journalists, academics, and everyday people started to notice that generative AI can sometimes lead to undesired outcomes, like when image generators created overly sexualized content for depictions of women, or when a conversation with a chatbot led one user to take their own life. As a result, generative AI became a major area of focus for our data journalism team at Bloomberg News. And so, as a leading news organization rooted in data-driven reporting, we wanted to understand how do we evaluate this technology for potential risks or harms? How do we communicate these risks to a global audience? And how do we keep AI developers and AI leaders accountable for these risks? At Bloomberg, our approach is similar to that of academic experts in the field. We design experiments to test and systematically audit AI systems for risks, biases, or harms. Today, I want to share two of Bloomberg's such auditing examples, one related to image generators and the other related to chatbots, and why these audits are an important solution for ethical and responsible artificial intelligence. At the beginning of last year, reporter Dina Bass from Bloomberg Technology and myself, we found that more and more institutions were using generative AI to create images for things like advertising or entertainment, even though there had been minimal external testing into how safe these systems were for the general public. This led us to conduct a data investigation into image generators and the magnitude of gender and racial biases in this emerging technology. We carried out an experiment using one of the most widely used open source models for AI-generated images. It's called Stable Diffusion. Our reporting team used Stable Diffusion to create thousands of images of workers in different professions. We used simple keywords like doctor or teacher to see if they alone would be enough to trigger the AI model towards a particular representation of a specific group or demographic in society. We then analyzed bias in the images created, borrowing methods developed by Dr. Timnit Gebru and Dr. Joy Bulamwini, two leading experts in the field of AI bias. And the results of this in-house experiment corroborated those of the scientific community and has allowed us to highlight a systemic pattern of racial and gender bias where women and people with dark skin are underrepresented across images of high-paying jobs and overrepresented in low-paying jobs. For example, take a look at this sample of images created by Stable Diffusion when it was prompted to create an image of a CEO. A housekeeper, and a judge. You may be wondering if these image sets could just be a representation of the disparities that exist in our society. What we found is this is not the case. By looking at real demographic data and thousands of these images. We found that generative AI, like Stable Diffusion, doesn't just replicate disparities or stereotypes that exist in our society. It actually exacerbates them and makes them appear much worse than those found in the real world. Let's consider the example of judges that I just showed on the screen. Women made up only 3% of the images generated for this profession. But the reality is, across OECD countries, women make up 54% of judges. There are more women judges than male judges on average. Things got worse when we looked at the intersection of gender and racial biases in generative artificial intelligence. Because stereotypes about gender and race are both amplified at the same time, generative AI tends to produce its most skewed representations of reality when it comes to women with darker skin tones. Let me show you an example of what I mean. While there were almost no women with dark skin tones within images generated for high-paying jobs, when we prompted the generative AI model for keywords like fast food worker or social worker, Stable Diffusion generated women with dark skin tones almost half of the time. We also found that generative AI amplifies stereotypes about what types of people engage in criminal activity. Another example on the screen here. When prompted with the keyword inmate, Stable Diffusion generated 5 images of dark-skinned people for every 1 image of a lighter-skinned person, even though less than half of incarcerated people in each of the United States, the United Kingdom, and Canada are people of color. And these biases really become more apparent if you do something called face averaging, which is essentially taking all of the AI-generated images for one keyword and you combine them into a typical or average face for that keyword, which is what is shown in this slide. These typical faces make it clear that the AI model paints a picture of the world in which certain jobs belong to some groups of people and not others. A world in which criminal activities are caused by some groups of people and not others. Now, many experts in the field of AI ethics who have been studying AI bias for years now, and whose research has greatly inspired this investigation, have warned that the persistent gender and racial bias in artificial intelligence can cause serious societal harm. Our reporting and interviews with dozens of researchers, activists, and industry leaders has emphasized how biased generative AI systems could exacerbate gender and racial inequality. For example, by creating significant educational and professional barriers for people with marginalized identities, such as women, girls, and people of color. That negative stereotypes can lead to issues of low self-worth, lack of confidence, and other mental health issues for younger generations. In the criminal legal system, AI systems like facial recognition tools are already being used by thousands of police departments. And in the past, bias within facial recognition and other AI tools has led to wrongful arrests. Experts that we have interviewed have warned that the use of generative AI in a policing contest used for tasks such as the creation of photorealistic suspect sketches could exacerbate the issue of biased policing. And so bias in generative AI is especially relevant in high-stakes settings. That is, settings like policing or hiring, where AI systems risk to negatively impact the safety or fundamental rights of people involved, as defined by the AI Act, the world's first comprehensive AI law recently adopted by the European Commission. In these high-stakes settings, bias in generative AI poses a serious risk for the automated discrimination of large groups of people. And so in my second example, I would like to talk more about generative AI in hiring, one such high-stakes setting. Recently, our reporting found that employers and human resource vendors are using generative AI like chatbots, think ChatGPT, to screen and rank job applicants. And this has motivated another more recent data investigation led by my incredible colleagues, Leon Yin and Davy Alba from Bloomberg Technology. And this investigation looked at the use of OpenAI's GPT for resume screening. What we found is that GPT will racially discriminate applicants based only on their name. For each of 4 real job postings, we used 8 resumes with equal qualifications and experience. And one key difference, the name on top of the resume. And whether this name is statistically associated with men or women who are Americans that are Black, white, Hispanic, or Asian. We then asked GPT to rank the resumes to identify the most qualified candidate for a real job opening at a Fortune 500 company. We repeated this experiment thousands of times. Even though the resumes were equally qualified, GPT's answers showed stark disparities. For example, for a financial analyst role, resumes with names distinct to Asian Americans were ranked as the top candidate nearly twice as often as resumes with names distinct to Black Americans. We also found that GPT's preferences changed depending on the job posting. For example, GPT was more likely to rank resumes with names distinct to women as the top candidate for a human resources role compared to resumes with names distinct to men. These disparities were so significant that GPT would actually fail adverse impact benchmarks in a hiring setting. For those who are not familiar, adverse impact is a government standard used to test for discriminatory hiring practices in the United States. In this example, GPT has learned that names encode societal stereotypes, and as a result, displays inherent bias when presented with a given name. And the bias here is almost hidden, which makes it very difficult for developers to identify and correct for. So I'd now like to conclude my speech by highlighting why it's important for journalists to do this kind of work, to conduct AI algorithmic audits. On top of demystifying artificial intelligence for everyday people, this work can actually lead to real societal change. For example, our investigation on bias in image generators has been cited now as a main reference for AI policy recommendations for local governments, as well as in official documents about future AI risks from national governments like the UK Government of Science, documents published by international bodies such as the United Nations and the International Monetary Fund, and NGOs like Amnesty International. This story is used as a main reference for AI best practices at dozens of educational institutions like the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, and in the private sector, it has motivated the development of an AI model trained specifically to address racial bias. There is no doubt that generative artificial intelligence offers great potential to improve our personal and professional lives. But there are also clear shortcomings with this technology, like the issue of amplified gender and racial biases in AI-generated content. As a result, this technology also has the potential to cause harm for certain groups of people. Mitigating these negative outcomes often starts with gaining transparency into generative AI systems. And that's why external algorithmic audits, such as those that journalists do, are important to demystify how generative AI systems work, to highlight their shortcomings, and to improve public knowledge of this emerging technology. By promoting this transparency, audits like these can also serve to inform technological and regulatory solutions that ensure that generative AI systems are built and used around public interests and public values. Thank you very much.